Washington, D.C., November 1962. Audrey Hepburn stood before her dressing room mirror in the Wardman Park Hotel, adjusting the simple black dress she'd chosen for this impossible meeting. The invitation had come through the most unexpected channels, not through her agent, not through Paramount Studios, but through a quiet phone call from Pierre Salinger, President Kennedy's press secretary. "Mrs. Kennedy would like to meet you," he'd said, his voice carefully neutral. "Privately, the president has requested your presence for an informal conversation about the arts and American culture." Audrey had nearly dropped the phone. She'd met many powerful people, directors, producers, European aristocrats from her mother's world. But the President of the United States? That was different. That carried weight she wasn't sure she understood. The instructions had been precise and strange. Take a commercial flight, not the studio's private jet. Check into the hotel under the name Miss Ella Van Heemstra, her mother's maiden name. Tell no one where she was going. Wait for contact. It felt like a scene from one of her films, except the stakes were real. Now, as she applied the last touch of lipstick, Audrey wondered why. Why her? Why this secrecy? She'd never been political. She'd survived a war, yes, but that had made her want to stay far from politics, not dive deeper into them. She believed in beauty, in kindness, in the power of art to heal wounds that politics only seemed to make worse. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Van Heemstra, your car is here." The ride to the White House was silent. The driver, clearly Secret Service, offered no conversation. They didn't go to the main entrance where tourists gathered for photos. Instead, they drove around to a service gate Audrey didn't know existed. She was led through corridors that looked more like an office building than the seat of American power. Plain walls, fluorescent lights, the quiet efficiency of government at work. Finally, she was shown to a small waiting room with generic furniture and old magazines. A young Secret Service agent stood by the door. He looked carved from granite, all sharp angles and watchful eyes. "The president will see you shortly, Miss Hepburn. Please wait here." Audrey sat down, her hands folded in her lap. She'd learned stillness during the war years, how to wait, how to be quiet, how to make herself small when danger lurked nearby. But this felt different. This felt like waiting for something that might change everything. After 10 minutes, the door opened. But it wasn't President Kennedy. "Miss Hepburn." The man who entered had cold, calculating eyes and an intensity that filled the room. "I'm Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General." Audrey stood, extending her hand. Bobby's handshake was firm to the point of being aggressive. "Mr. Attorney General, I wanted to speak with you before you meet my brother." Bobby's voice carried an edge that made the temperature seem to drop. "Do you know why you're here?" "The president invited me to discuss the arts." "The arts?" Bobby repeated the words like they tasted bitter. "Miss Hepburn, my brother admires artists, believes they're important for American culture. I'm less convinced." "Of what exactly?" "Of their loyalties, of their discretion, of whether their primary allegiance is to their craft or to their country." Audrey felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Are you questioning my patriotism, Mr. Kennedy?" "I'm questioning your judgment. You've lived in Europe. You have connections to aristocratic families with complicated political histories. Your mother's family had dealings with individuals who later collaborated with Nazi sympathizers." The accusation hit Audrey like a physical blow. Her voice became very quiet, very controlled. "My mother's family lost everything fighting the Nazis. I carried resistance messages in my ballet shoes when I was 14. I watched my neighbors starve during the hunger winter. Don't ever question where my loyalties lie." Bobby leaned against the wall, studying her. "Strong words, but words are easy. Actions matter more. My brother is the most powerful man in the world, and he's also one of the most vulnerable. Everyone wants something from him. Everyone has an agenda." "I don't want anything from your brother." "Everyone wants something, Miss Hepburn. Fame, access, influence, the ability to say they know the president personally. What's your angle?" Audrey's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from controlled anger. "My angle is that your brother asked to meet me, and I said yes out of respect for the office. If you think I'm here for some ulterior motive, you're wrong. Time will tell." Bobby straightened up. "Let me be clear. I'm watching you. If I find out you're using this meeting for personal gain, If you leak details to the press, if you do anything that compromises my brother's safety or reputation, I will come after you with everything I have. Do we understand each other?" Before Audrey could respond, the door opened again. This time it was President Kennedy himself. "Bobby, what are you doing?" JFK's voice was light, but there was steel underneath. "Miss Hepburn is my guest. Just having a conversation, Jack. Take it somewhere else." It was clearly an order disguised as a suggestion. "Miss Hepburn, I apologize for my brother. He's protective." Bobby left, but not before giving Audrey one final warning look. Kennedy watched his brother go, then sighed deeply. "I'm sorry about that. Bobby means well, but sometimes he sees threats where none exist." "He thinks I'm a threat to you?" Kennedy smiled. Genuine, warm, nothing like the practiced political expression she'd expected. "Bobby thinks everyone is a threat to me. It's his job to be paranoid so I don't have to be." He gestured toward the door. "Come on, let's go somewhere more comfortable. This room is depressing." They walked through several corridors, Kennedy moving quickly despite rumors about his back problems. Secret Service agents followed at a distance, close enough for protection, but far enough away to create the illusion of privacy. They ended up in a small private sitting room, not the Oval Office, but something more intimate. Family photos on the desk, bookshelves along the walls, comfortable furniture that looked actually lived in. Kennedy poured 2 glasses of wine. "Jackie suggested I serve tea, but I thought we might need something stronger after Bobby's interrogation." Audrey accepted the glass gratefully. "Why did you want to meet me, Mr. President?" "Call me Jack. And honestly, because Jackie watches your films when she's stressed, she says there's something about your presence that's calming, authentic. After Cuba, after everything we've been through this year, I could use some authentic conversation." "I'm not sure I understand." Kennedy sat down across from her, and for a moment the presidency seemed to fall away. He just looked tired. "Everyone who talks to me wants something. Senators want favors. Advisors want decisions. Foreign leaders want commitments. Even friends want the prestige of knowing the president. But Jackie thought you might be different." "Different how?" "She said you survived a war without becoming bitter, that you've achieved success without becoming cynical. She said maybe you could help me remember what it's like to have a conversation that isn't about policy or politics or power." Audrey set down her wine. "Mr. President, Jack, I think you're giving me too much credit. I'm just an actress." "No, you're not." Kennedy's voice was firm. "You're a survivor. You understand suffering in ways most people don't. And from what I've read about you, you've channeled that understanding into something beautiful instead of something destructive." They talked for nearly 2 hours. Kennedy asked about her films, but more than that, he asked about her philosophy, how she'd maintained hope after experiencing horror, how she'd found beauty in a world that had shown her ugliness, how she'd learned to trust people again after betrayal. "During the war," Audrey said quietly, "I learned that cruelty is a choice. People chose to be cruel, but they could just as easily choose to be kind. The same circumstances that break some people strengthen others. It depends on what you decide to do with the pain. And you decided to create beauty. I decided to try. Every film, every performance, it's my attempt to add something good to the world instead of more darkness." Kennedy was quiet for a long moment. "I envy that. I went into politics because I wanted to make things better, but sometimes I feel like all I do is manage crises and make compromises. When did governing become so removed from actually helping people?" "Maybe it doesn't have to be," Audrey said. "Maybe the problem is that everyone expects you to be perfect, to have all the answers. But what if you just tried to be human? Can a president be human? I think a president has to be human. Otherwise, how can he understand what the people need?" As the conversation continued, Kennedy seemed to relax in ways Audrey hadn't expected. He talked about his children, about the pressure of living up to his family's expectations, about the loneliness of making decisions that affected millions of lives. "Sometimes," he said, "I think about what it would be like to walk away from all this, to just be Jack Kennedy instead of President Kennedy." "What stops you?" "Duty, responsibility, the knowledge that if I don't do this job, someone else will. and they might not care as much about doing it right. He paused. And maybe pride. The Kennedy family doesn't quit. Near the end of their meeting, Kennedy did something unexpected. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small, elegant brooch, a golden dove with tiny diamonds for eyes. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said, holding it carefully. "She gave it to my mother, who gave it to Jackie. But Jackie wanted you to have it." "I couldn't possibly, please." Jackie insisted. "She said it represents something important, that beauty and peace can coexist, that art and politics don't have to be enemies." He smiled. "She also said you'd understand the symbolism better than most people." Audrey accepted the brooch with trembling hands. It was exquisite, delicate, meaningful in ways she couldn't fully articulate. "Thank you. It's beautiful." So was this conversation. "Thank you for reminding me why I wanted to be president in the first place. To serve people, not politics." As Audrey prepared to leave, Kennedy said something that would haunt her for years to come. "Audrey, if something happens to me, if this job takes a turn I can't predict, I want you to know that conversations like this, moments of genuine human connection, these are what I'll miss most. Not the power or the history books, but the chance to sit with someone and talk about what really matters." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Audrey said automatically. Kennedy's smile was sad. "You never know. This job comes with risks I accepted when I took the oath. But someone has to do it." The ride back to her hotel was quiet, but Audrey's mind raced. She looked at the brooch in her palm, thinking about everything Kennedy had shared, about the weight he carried, about how desperately he needed human connection in a world of constant political calculation. 11 months later, on November 22nd, 1963, Audrey was in her London flat when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was shaking. "Miss Hepburn? This is Pierre Salinger. The president. President Kennedy has been shot in Dallas. He's gone." The brooch was in Audrey's jewelry box. She took it out with trembling hands, remembering Kennedy's words about what he would miss most, human connection. The vibrant, tired, hopeful man she'd spent 2 hours with was gone, killed in the street like a common criminal. 3 days after the assassination, Bobby Kennedy called her directly. "Miss Hepburn, I need to interview you about your meeting with my brother. We're investigating everyone who had contact with him in the weeks before his death." The interview took place in the Federal Building in London, with FBI agents taking notes. Bobby looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were hollow, his hands shook as he wrote, "Tell me everything you and the president discussed." Audrey recounted the conversation, the talk about beauty and politics, about survival and hope, about the loneliness of leadership. She left nothing out except the personal details that would serve no investigative purpose. When she finished, Bobby asked, "Did my brother seem worried about anything specific?" "He mentioned that the job came with risks, but not anything specific." Bobby's pen stopped moving. "What were his exact words?" Audrey repeated Kennedy's comment about if something happens to me, about missing human connection most of all. Bobby went very pale. "And you didn't think to report this?" "Report what? A man acknowledging the obvious dangers of his position?" "Mr. Kennedy, your brother wasn't speaking about a specific threat. He was speaking about the general burden of the presidency." Bobby slammed his hand on the table. "My brother is dead, and you sat there listening to him talk about something happening to him and did nothing." Audrey's voice remained steady. "What should I have done? Called the Secret Service to report that the president understands his job is dangerous? That wouldn't have saved him." "Give me the brooch." "What?" "The brooch my brother gave you. It's evidence." "Evidence of what?" "A gift given in friendship?" "Evidence of the meeting. I need it for the investigation." Audrey reached into her purse and placed the brooch on the table. Bobby picked it up with shaking hands, staring at it like it held answers to questions he couldn't bear to ask. "He gave this to people he trusted," Bobby whispered. "People he thought were friends. I was his friend. For 2 hours I was his friend." Bobby looked up at her with eyes full of pain and rage. "Were you? Or were you just another person using him for your own purposes? I wanted nothing from your brother except to give him a moment of peace. That's all." Bobby didn't respond. He just sat there holding the brooch looking broken. Years passed. Audrey never spoke publicly about her meeting with Kennedy. When reporters asked, she'd say simply, "I met the president once. It was an honor." In 1968, when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in Los Angeles, Audrey felt a profound sadness that surprised her. Bobby had been hostile, paranoid, cruel in his grief, but she understood now what had driven him. The impossible task of protecting someone who couldn't be protected. The crushing weight of failure when the unthinkable happened. She sent flowers to the funeral anonymously. In 1975, while Audrey was working with UNICEF, she received an unexpected package. The return address read, Mrs. John F. Kennedy. Inside was the brooch, carefully wrapped, along with a handwritten note. Dear Audrey, I found this among Jack's personal effects, along with a note he'd written about your meeting. He wrote that you gave him something precious, a conversation without agenda, a moment of genuine humanity in a world of constant performance. Bobby was wrong to take this from you. He was grieving, frightened, looking for someone to blame. But Jack's note made it clear how much your friendship meant to him in those final months. This belongs to you. It always did. With gratitude for the gift you gave my husband, the gift of seeing him as a man, not just a president. Jacqueline. Audrey held the brooch to the light, watching the tiny diamonds catch fire. She thought about Kennedy's loneliness, about Bobby's pain, about how fear and grief could make people cruel to those who deserved kindness. She thought about a November afternoon in 1962 when a president had asked her to remind him how to be human, and how that conversation, brief, private, genuine, had mattered more than either of them could have known at the time. The brooch now sits in a private collection, a reminder that sometimes the most important meetings are the ones that never make the history books, the ones where powerful people become vulnerable, where strangers become friends, where art and politics find common ground in the simple act of two humans talking honestly about what matters most. Audrey kept that secret for her entire life, not because it was dangerous, but because it was precious, a moment when the weight of the world lifted just long enough for genuine connection to flourish. That's what Bobby Kennedy had tried to prevent, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear that any human connection might be a weakness, any moment of vulnerability might be exploited. He was wrong. The greatest strength Kennedy showed that day wasn't political, it was personal. The courage to be human in a job that demanded he be something more and less than that. It's a lesson worth remembering, that in a world of power and politics, the most radical act is sometimes just being real.